When the model is built and all of its edges made hard or soft through vertex normals, then you're ready to assign UVs. The object should have some coordinate values to determine how to apply file maps or other 2D maps onto surfaces. So you can go ahead and add a material at this point, but if your UVs aren't sorted out, then maps may appear in strange places. In this case, I'm going to build the material and then show you the issue of improper UVs so you'll get a clear visual on it. In general, however, in a production pipeline, you'll probably do the UV layout before picking out the materials. It's common that the modeler will do the UV layout and then will go down the line to the next person who's going to work with shaders, and they expect the UV layout to be already done. Okay, so we're going to assign a material that's a little bit unorthodox. Usually you would do your UVs first, but it's so that we will be able to see exactly what's happening. Select the object and let's give it a name. Call it TV. And we'll go ahead and assign a material. Right-click, assign new material. This time we want a blend because we want shiny highlights. And I'm going to set the color to be a sort of light gray or silver. Give it a little bit more eccentricity here, just so it will show up. We're deliberately making it silver. But I don't want it to be reflective in the sense of mirror reflections, so bring the reflectivity down to 0. And I'll call it TV Chassis Blend. And press Enter. Now that's assigned to the whole object. I want to create different materials for different parts. Maya makes it very easy to do that. Right-click and choose Faces, and you can assign materials on a per-face basis. So I'll select those with Control-Shift. Right-click, and once again, assign new material. This is going to be for a speaker. So let's give it a Lambert material, which doesn't have shiny highlights. And I'll rename it, call it Speaker Lambert. Press Enter, make it darker. Dark gray. You can unselect that and check it. Cool, then we have the screen itself. Select that front face, right-click, and choose Assign New Material. It's going to be a shiny blend. We'll rename it, we'll call it TV Screen Blend. And this one should be black, or nearly black, with a high reflectivity, in case we ever put ray trace reflections on that. Reflectivity of 0.5 is probably going to work pretty well. And we want to apply a map, but we don't want to put it into the color here. We want to put it into incandescence. That way the color will be consistent regardless of whether light is falling on that surface or not. It'll be self-illuminated. In the incandescent slot, I'll click on the Create Render Node button, the little checker. And I got Create Render Node opening up. This will be a file node. When I add the file node, I get taken to the file node attributes. But at this point, I need to make sure that my image is actually in the correct folder. Right now, it's not. So before I start browsing around for a file, I need to remember and stop and check myself. Let's minimize Maya. I need to put the image into the source images. And that's in My Documents, Maya Projects, Low Poly Maya Projects, Source Images. So there's my image to put on the TV. It needs to be in source images before I go browsing in that file node. Go back to Maya. If we lose our selection, it's easy enough to get back to that. Just select the object, go back to TV Screen Blend, Incandescence, and here you've got, go to the input node. That'll take you back to that file node. Click the Browse button, and you should be taken to Low Poly Maya Project Source Images, and then select that PNG and open it. You won't see it in the viewport until you activate shaded mode. You can select anything in the viewport and press the 6 key, and now you're seeing that incandescence map. But it's not got good UVs. It looks messy. It's in the wrong place. We're only seeing a tiny piece of the image. At this point now, we're ready to assign UV coordinates. But again, usually you would have done that before you get to this point. We just want to be able to see this really clearly. UV layout is the process of fitting all of the pieces of a 3D model into a 2D canvas. And that's a step that can be sometimes very tedious and complicated. In this case, it's going to be very simple. all we want to do is essentially assign an automatic mapping to the TV that's going to lay out all the pieces of the object flat onto a decal sheet, essentially, so that maybe it could be painted later. And then assign a custom planar map onto the surface of the screen so we can control the placement of the image. Automatic mapping is pretty much always a good idea. You never know if the model is going to be mapped later. Right-click and choose Object Mode and select the whole object. And in order to see the results, let's look at the existing layout. Go into Edit UVs and open up the UV Texture Editor. And dolly back a little bit with the wheel. This is strictly for informational purposes, so we can see what's happening. This is the UV layout currently, and it's not in any kind of organized state. A texture paint artist could not work with this. They couldn't actually do their job in order to enhance the realism of the scene. We need to actually chop this up into flat pieces in a sort of decal sheet. With the object selected, go into Create UVs, Automatic Mapping. And there are some options for that, but I'm going to leave them alone. I'm just going to take what I get here. You can see that automatic mapping has cut all the pieces up into sections. And if we were actually going to paint this, we would want to sort of sew the pieces together and make them more continuous. But at this point, we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to now move on to the next stage, which is to map the front surface here. So I can close the UV Texture Editor and select just that front face. And if you're not sure, you can go back into wireframe mode with the 4 key and tumble around. So only that front face is selected. Go back to the 5 key and then the 6 key to see shading and then texturing. With that front face selected, I'm going to assign a planar map to it. Create UVs, planar mapping, and we need to go into the options because we're projecting from the x-axis, which is the side by default. We need to project from the front, so choose Z-axis and click Project. And now you'll see the ducky is the same size as the screen. If we want to adjust this, we can use the manipulator. So this is a different type of manipulator. We've seen the Show Manipulator tool for the Extrude tool. This is the Show Manipulator tool for the Poly Projection tool. So slightly different. We can play around with this interactively as we see here. If we deselect, then we will lose that ability. If we want to get back to that, we need to get the Show Manipulator tool active again. We can select the object and go into its planar projection node. If the manipulator was the last used tool, then we're able to go back to what we were doing before. But if we change tools, then we need to get back to the Show Manipulator tool. And it may not be listed here in the last used tool. You can always find it in the shelf. I've got it hidden here. So if I go into the shelf and under General, the very last one on the right is the Show Manipulator tool. And you get back to that tool. I know that my ducky is actually a perfect square. I can set projection width here, both to the same value. Drag my mouse across that and press 18 inches. Press Enter. And I can move this around as well. Change the offset values, but I'm going to opt to just leave him centered. I want to just keep him centered, and I'll set projection center X value to 0, and maybe only adjust projection center Y. Select the name and middle mouse drag. The tiling is not a factor of the model, it's actually a factor of the shader. We need to go back into the material. I'm going to exit out of component mode, go to object mode, just so we can see this a little bit more clearly. And go into the attribute editor, Control A. And I just want to find that material, which was the TV screen blend. And go back into the incandescence channel here. Click on Go to Input. And that takes us to the File node, but from there we can get to the Place 2D texture node. And in here we can disable wrapping. The last thing we see here is the fact that we have a gray background. That's in the File node. Well, I need to go back to the File node here and then scroll down to Color Balance. And this is the background. Default color, that's the background color. You can turn that up to white so it'll match. All right, cool. So my model is basically finished at this point. And we can check the lighting here just to verify, because that's supposed to be an incandescence map. that should be lit from within. I'm going to create a light. Create lights, directional light. Grab the move tool, bring it back a little bit and up, and press the 7 key on the keyboard. And now I'm seeing lighting in the viewport. With that light selected, go to its attributes, Control A. And under Object Display, just increase its locator scale to like 20 or so. And then we can use the Rotate tool to turn the light. We can get different effects here. So I'm just testing to verify that in fact, that's an incandescence map that's not based upon lighting. Even if the light is turned completely around, it's illuminating the back of the TV now. Even in that case, the ducky is fully illuminated. We can even turn on shadows to check that even further. Go to Lighting, Shadows. And you can see that as I rotate the light around, we're getting different shadowing effects. Cool. So that means our model is basically perfect. We've got an incandescence map, and we don't really need that light anymore, so we can delete it, go back to shaded mode with the 6 key. And that is our tutorial on low poly modeling in Maya. To finally clean up the scene, I should delete the construction history one last time because there are a couple of projection nodes in there. Edit Delete by Type History. And increment and save. And we've got our model completed and outputted to its final version. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. And if you want to learn more, just keep checking back at Digital Arts Guild or get a subscription at lynda.com for more advanced tutorials. Thank you.